Well, uncertainty is at its highest when it comes to student loans. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, for those who have student loan debt, the road to financial freedom has a lot of big bumps on it. Well, today college expert John Hupalo is here to shed some light on what you need to know. John, always great to have you on the program.
Bob, great to be back. Good morning.
And, I think we're going to get to a point where we're overrun with information. It's just amazing that all of the different options and news stories and everything that's out there, I got to imagine there's a lot of confused people.
There are a lot of confused people on every front, Bob, and that's why I appreciate the opportunity to go through the headlines with you once a month, because there's always something to talk about. And, our goal is to try to help people sort of sort through sometimes, as you say, a very confusing set of options. And 1 month the answer might be one thing, and then the next month it actually could be a little different. So I'm glad that we have a chance to talk about this on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Let's start just as an introduction. There was a article in Business Insider, and the bullet points are as follows. Trump's administration announced a pause on wage garnishment and tax refund seizure for defaulted student loan borrowers. At the same time, thousands of borrowers are waiting for debt relief through income-based repayment plans to be processed. The uncertainty is making it difficult for borrowers to financially prepare. I can't imagine that. I mean, being in a situation where you've got so many things hanging over your head. You don't want, tomorrow could be totally different, and the rules could change, or it could take a week or 2 months or whatever. But what a tough deal. Talk a little bit about some of these things that are happening and what the article was saying.
Yeah, the issue here, Bob, is around this question about whether or not the federal government can go in and actually take some money out of your paycheck. They call it wage garnishment, right? And so the very quick story, of course, is that after the student loan payment pause, the Biden administration said, we want people to start paying, but we're going to give you a long time to do that. And long story short, in the fall last year, the payments were due again, and if you weren't making your payments, they were going to report them to the credit bureaus. And of course, that's when the trouble starts for borrowers, because if they're delinquent on paying any loan, whether it's a credit card or a student loan or a mortgage or whatever, then their credit score is reduced because they're not paying on time. And the end of the sad saga for student loan borrowers is that if you get to the last place where you're just not making payments and you're in default, and you're not going to pay that loan, the government has the opportunity to go in and actually take the money out of your paycheck, a certain percentage of it. They can't take your whole paycheck, but they can take money from your paycheck. And they started doing that in, I think it was the end of the fall last year or December or somewhere in there. And of course, that created all kinds of issues for folks. So the recent announcement from the Trump administration was that, okay, we're going to sort of halt that for a little bit. Even though we have the legal capacity to go and take your money, we're going to try and work it out. So that was one set of issues. The other set of issues around this whole question about, okay, what are the repayment programs that we can actually use? And again, a lot of messy details with all this, but at the end of the day, they're trying to find a way to have some of these loans forgiven or not forgiven. And so, as you said, it's a little bit of a quagmire if you're in that situation. The one note of all this is that most people are not in this situation. It's a big headline because there are probably millions of people who are, but when you talk about the 40 million or so total student loan borrowers, again, this is a smaller group who has not been making those payments on time. So the question I think that every listener should be thinking about, okay, if I have a student loan, what should I do? And if you're paying your student loan, keep paying it. If you're not paying on your student loan and you might be set in one of these traps of, well, you might be garnished, you might not be garnished, you may be eligible for this type of repayment program or not. Call your student loan servicer and ask them if you have an intention to start paying, which is better for everybody, including the borrower. Try to find a way to make those payments, or at the very least, understand where you are in that whole set of jumbled circumstances. They'll tell you, okay, you're pending for a loan discharge or whatever it might be. You'll have an opportunity to know where your loan is in the process. And I think that's 2/3 of the battle for most people.
Yeah. And correct me if you see it differently. I look at this, read these articles and the reporting on this, and it seems to me that they're just making this painfully harder than it needs to be. I mean, you got a payment, you got an interest rate, you have the opportunity to clean the slate of credit reports. I mean, take all the bad stuff off. Let's just have a do-over, a start over. If you use a locked-in interest rate, I mean, I realize there's some of these repayment options that have to get cleared up, but it would just seem that they could streamline this. Is it just pure politics that's keeping them from making this a little bit more use a little common sense for a solution, or what's your take on it?
My take on it is that the politicians, and I always sort of talk about politicians and bankers. So bankers try to solve problems the way you just thought about it. Okay, I have someone who has this much income. How can I fix this? I'll rewrite the note or whatever it might be. The politicians, on the other hand, are trying to solve political problems, and that's where the political footballs get involved with one group thinking that, okay, all the loans should be forgiven. The other group thinking, well, no, they owe, so we should wage garnish, right? And so, like, where do you find the middle ground? Which is why people are stuck, because all these forces are pulling each other, and some of them want to forgive all the loans, some of them want to start the wage garnishment, and I think your point is one that I've been trying to make, but no one's going to listen, even to some of the experts. Like someone contacted me not too long ago who's a named person. Somebody listened to this person. I said, well, why don't we just do this? And my answer was, what you said was very logical, but the horse is out of the barn. They looked at this last year around the big, beautiful bill. They set in place what they want to do, and then the Department of Education is now empowered to go and recreate the programs. They're going to streamline the repayment programs for the new borrowers coming online. And unfortunately, those who have loans and they're in trouble, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but that's a problem that's occurred in the past. They're trying to make the system better for the future. And those folks that you're talking about are the ones who are caught in the middle of this whole thing. And it is hard to watch it unfold.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. John Hupalo is here today, and we're talking a little bit about what's happening with student loans. I keep coming. I don't have a hard stat to share, but I keep coming across information that points to. Now, I'll probably get this a little bit off on the age, but age, just say 50 and above, are in a real mess when it comes to student loans, and I can't wrap my head around that. How could age 50 and a half or 50 and above be that indebted with school loans?
Yeah, and Bob, that's a great question. And for many of those people, it may be their loans, but they may have been chronic defaulters or didn't make the payments on their loans. But it's more likely that they have taken out Parent Plus loans for their kids. So, when the schools 10 years ago accepted little Sally to come to school, they said to the parents, oh, by the way, we have this plus loan program, and basically everybody qualifies for it, so you can take up to the full cost of attendance for your child to go to her dream school. And so a lot of parents sign those loans thinking, incorrectly, by the way, that they might be able to put that debt onto Sally once she got on her feet. But that's a parent loan. That's a plus loan. There is no way out of that for the parent. So parents have that debt. Or on the other side of that coin, they might have gone to the private loan market around that same time and said, Sally needs a loan. And some of the big lenders said, oh, yeah, we'll make you a loan based on your credit score, so you're going to get a better rate than you got in the plus loan market. But guess what? you are dead unless Sally becomes a viable credit entity. And what I mean by that is she can pass the credit test, but the way the lender thinks about it is I want somebody on the hook who can pay for this. So Sally gets out of school, she gets a great job, we can let the parent go because we know Sally's going to pay. And I think many of those parents co-signed a loan or took a Parent Plus loan, and now they're sitting there saying, "Oh man, I'm near my retirement age, or I'm in retirement, and all of a sudden I'm sitting on $40,000 or $50,000 of student loan debt." What
right.
was I thinking about? That's the big problem.
I rarely have a whole lot of positive to say when we're talking about some of these things because I think they're so mismanaged. But, I was looking at this press release, and dare I say, and you tell me if you agree or not, it feels like they're going in the right direction. They're actually taking some steps that you look at it and go, well, that does make sense.
I agree. The big, beautiful bill has a lot of politics around it on all sides, but the one thing that they did in the big, beautiful bill is they've now set in stone what's going to happen for current borrowers in the program. So the students who are starting, and all this starts around the July 1 each year for the next academic year. So on July 1 this year, they're going to reset the federal interest rate for all of direct loans and for the plus loans. Those are fixed rate loans, and that's set. The second thing that they're going to do now is have, as I said before, just two repayment programs, sort of the standard and then one for people who are in trouble. So no longer like in the current environment where a lot of the folks that we're talking about are trying to figure out what the right path is. There are 7 or 8 or 9 different repayment programs with all these crazy names, pay, repay. It got very confusing for that. But I think you're right. They're going in the right direction. And the other piece about this bankruptcy discharge, a lot of folks will say, well, wait a minute, this is really great. I can wipe my slate clean, I'll do the bankruptcy discharge, and I'll go on my way. Well, that's true, but there are serious consequences. I actually testified in the 2005 era, somewhere around there, 2003 or 4 or 5, on the other side of that, saying that this is in front of a congressional subcommittee looking at the discharge of student loans. And my point was that there are unintended consequences of a discharge that are really difficult. And you don't want to give student loan borrowers an easy out, per se, because that bankruptcy is noted on your credit profile for 7 or 10 years. Your credit score is going to go down immediately by at least 100 points. The good news is, of course, you wipe out that debt and you can start to rebuild your credit profile so that your score will start going up. But during that time, it's going to be really hard to buy anything on credit. So it's just not wave the magic wand, discharge my student loan debt, and all of a sudden the sun is shining. It's going to take a little while to get back on the good side of the credit bureaus.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that, and one of the things that come to mind is that, wow, my credit is already shot. And so throw 2 or 3 more years on the top of that. I can. And the other thing too is back up a little bit on where this has even come into as part of the discussion where it's bankruptcy, because we've talked about. I know this was a Biden thing. But talk a little bit about the months leading up to this, that giving students the ability to walk away from their student loan debt.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to do that as a layman. So if anybody, my first piece of advice is this is very complicated. So you need to go even to one of the consumer advocacy groups that might be out there to help folks wind their way through the bankruptcy process, because there's Chapter 13 bankruptcy and Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and it's all very technical. But I'll say this. In order to have your student loan discharged, you have to have a bankruptcy proceeding already underway. So you have to go to a bankruptcy court and file it. And then there's a second add-on called an adversary proceeding in the bankruptcy court. And that's the proceeding in which you can have your student loan considered for discharge. And in order for that to happen, the court has a separate ruling, and they have to say that you are suffering an undue hardship by carrying the student loan, because the courts in a regular bankruptcy proceeding are not disposed of saying to a student loan borrower, we're going to let you off the hook for your student loan. What the bankruptcy court says, you have to do the special filing, this adversary proceeding, and then you have to convince us that you have undue hardship, that you've made a good effort to repay, that if you were not able to maintain some minimal level of a living after this payment was made, that we're not going to actually allow for the discharge. And you have to have some evidence that this discharge or hardship, the hardship is going to persist for some period of time. So they set the bar pretty high. In 2022, the administration tried to actually lower the standards, so more of these adversarial proceedings are succeeding. The borrowers have a better opportunity to prove undue hardship. But again, this is, as you're saying, this is a situation where people are already under duress. Their credit profile has been shot. They're probably getting calls from all kinds of different lenders saying, you need to pay us, you need to pay us. Now the next thing you know, they're in this bankruptcy proceeding that's highly technical. And it's a very emotional time for folks. But, you know, there are processes in place, but it's not easy. And frankly, it was purposely designed not to be easy because of what I said earlier. Once you're successful and the discharge occurs, yep, the student loan is now off your credit profile. They'll probably put some note on there like included in bankruptcy or discharged in bankruptcy. But that note stays on your credit profile for 7 or 10 years. The good news is in all of this, with the bankruptcy proceeding wiping the student loan debt out, I can now start rebuilding my credit profile. And just a quick thing on that. If you're successful, the way to rebuild your credit is to actually check your credit score. So at the 3 credit bureaus, go and check and make sure that everything's noted accurately. And then the best advice is go and open a secured credit card. Secured means that I'll get $1,000 credit card, but I have to put $1,000 up. And then the other really key part of this, and this is a very technical thing around how credit scores work, but you have a higher credit score if you have low utilization of your card. So if you have $1,000 secured card and you're charging $20 a month, that's better for your credit score than if you're charging $200 a month or $500 a month. So you want your utilization to be low and your credit capacity to be high so that you have a better credit score. But again, all this is very technical, and I think that seeking outside advice and some of the consumer advocacy groups can help folks to understand what they need to do to get through a bankruptcy and then rebuild their credit scores.
I think the best way to put it is John is not an attorney, nor is he trying to play one on the radio. I think that's
on the radio.
It's the best one.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll keep you out of legal, keep us out of legal problems. So if you're in an unusual situation that you find yourself with wage garnishment is about to happen, maybe the employer is not aware of the rules or the pause or anything like that. What steps do you take, or are most employers do they know what's going on?
The employers actually they're almost blind to it, right? All they know is that there's this wage garnishment's been attached, so they have to reduce the paycheck and send the money to the government. But what I have to do, if any of your listeners are in this situation, are trying to figure out what to do, do what I just did while we were talking is, Google. I think I'm an average person looking to file student loan bankruptcy. How should I proceed or something like that. And they give you the names of some of the advocacy groups that work with this. There's student loan ombudsman. So just doing a little online research should help you find some resources to help you understand what your options are. I think that's really the best way to do it.
Yeah, and to add to that, and you brought it up, which I think was great that you did. You got to be careful about the resources that you're getting information from. You can put a sensationalized title on this. You really can get out of your student loans in court. It was one that was in this article, and it just makes it sound like a lot of the financial media tend to do. It makes it sound very easy. Just go do it and it's done. I was trying to think of when the bankruptcy laws changed for good, where you couldn't just walk in and declare bankruptcy and be done with it. Was it 2005?
I don't know for sure, Bob, but yeah, it was somewhere in that. And the other thing I'll say, there is someone that I know who I trust implicitly. She's done great work over decades. The woman who is Betsy Mayotte, Mayott, and she runs something called the Institute for Free Student Loan Advisors and Advice. And I don't ever think twice about sending folks to her. Tick is really, really good at what they do, and she has a group of people who are experts in this. She's a former ombudsman, so the liaison between sort of like governments and people for what used to be called American Student Assistance, and one of the better student loan guarantors that were out there under the old federal system. So Betsy at the Institute for Free Student Advisors and Advice is really a great resource. Her website also has a ton of really good information on it just for free. So I would stop there. It's a good, reputable resource.
Also want to add one more additional resource people need to be checking out is your website. And talk about what you guys are doing over there and some of the free, I want to stress free information that you have available.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. At mycollegecorner.com, there's information there, including some student loan calculators. We've just put one up for high school seniors and others who are going to get a federal direct loan. Go on there, no inputs required. Just you can see what the payments will be. You can do some analysis there. And also, Bob, we just put up an article this morning, and maybe we can talk about this one day, just about the Trump accounts and 529s and savings for college and understanding all of that. It's a really fascinating time in the world of paying for college. So that would be great if we could talk about that one day.
Yeah, one last thing. If you were, actually two last things, as long as we don't run out of time. What is, how do you find reputable resources? I mean, this thing is just changing as quickly as it can change. And you obviously want to stay up on anything new that's coming out. Any ideas, any suggestions?
My go-to, and obviously I think that Reddit, frankly, is really interesting, but I had some pretty interesting conversations with some of the lawyers on Reddit about this whole bankruptcy thing, and they were telling me, well, you just don't understand how this is really good for borrowers and all that. So I think those kinds of I'm going to say forums online where people are just giving their advice, that's really sometimes it's good, most of the time it's really questionable. But go to places like the National Association of Consumer Advocates, these very well-founded things like Betsy's organization. I would go high, like the National Association of State Treasurers, if you're looking for information about 529s or College Savings Plan Network, but sort of big, reputable organizations. Sometimes somebody said to me, there's a difference between advice and expertise. And I can give you advice about anything, but you want expertise sometimes.
I like that.
Go find it.
Yeah, and I was as you were talking about that, I was thinking the critical part of this question maybe needs to be different. What can you do to avoid the bad resources, because there's a lot of misinformation that's out there trying to. And when you're facing something like student loan debt, you're grasping for anything and hoping everything is true that you read. But be smarter than that. Well, John, always great to have you on the program, and we will see you next month.
Look forward to it. Be well. Thank you, Bob.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. If you have got a question for me, please go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.